You're watching Exit 1055 with your host, Richard Rose.
Hey, good morning. I'm Richard Rose. Welcome to Exit 1055 Long Island. This is your TV 1055 show about all things Long Island. In just a few moments, we'll show you the cameras that are now planted in the Massapequa Preserve after several disturbing incidents. Why police say, though, it's only to help make residents feel safe. But we begin this morning with word that so-called congestion pricing is back on the table to help pay for the MTA repairs to the subway and commuter rail system, including the Long Island Railroad. The idea is to charge suburban and outer borough commuters a fee whenever they enter Manhattan at rush hour below 59th Street. The proposal was shot down several years ago when Michael Bloomberg was New York City's mayor, but now Governor Andrew Cuomo is reportedly reconsidering it. That's because commuters from Long Island and New Jersey have been redirected to the city's subway system as our summer-long repairs go on at Penn Station that forced the MTA to take several tracks out of service, and that has shown a spotlight on what is also the overburdened subway system that is also in need of its own repairs. And joining us now is Robert Sinclair. He's from AAA Northeast, and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
It's back.
Yeah, it's back. Here we go again. Right. You know, anytime we run into some sort of difficulty, let's try and reach into the motorist pocket to get the money to take care of things. It's not a bottomless pit, though. People have to realize that we did some calculations, and there are roughly 240,000 people that are driving into Manhattan to work, driving their own cars, parking, and working. 35% of those, I should say 26% of those, are making $35,000 or less per year. So this acts as a very serious regressive tax when you're charging everybody the same rate, and not everybody has the same income.
Well, there's a ton of people trying to come into the city, and we're trying to figure out a way to get them all here so they can go to work in a way they can afford. And so we seem to go back and forth on a lot of these. Is there any legislative approval for this out there? Do you think there's any support for this idea?
That's the rub. That wouldn't happen until the legislature reconvenes, and that's not happening until January. So in the meantime, it's a lot of thought and what have you. But we're envisioning that they would probably put toll reading devices such as they have now in the cashless facilities on the ones that are free, because it's generally those BMW, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Williamsburg Bridge, Queensboro Bridge that are going into Manhattan in the affected area below 60th Street or below 59th Street. And assuming that they charge the same rate as an Easy Pass of $576, we calculate it would be an extra burden of $2,880 a year. $2,880 a year for those that are driving, and that's a lot of money, assuming back and forth that they'd be charged going in and going out. If those facilities were on those bridges, how else might they do it?
Yeah, because we don't have any details yet. Supposedly this is going to be coming out in the governor's State of the State address before next year or in January. And then we'd have to see if any lawmakers actually have the desire to support this, because it's politically difficult for everyone, right?
Well, especially in those areas where you've got state assembly people or senators or what have you that are representing areas that have access to free bridges now. And so all of a sudden you're going to tell their constituents that now you have to pay. So it's going to be a hard sell for them. And really, we wonder if there's the political mustard to be able to do this with the state legislature once they reconvene.
Yeah, you know, it's hard choices, but our whole system, and it's kind of ironic, is that people were told, okay, we'll put you on the subways because we've got to fix the MTA system, the rail system that didn't have the repairs done to it that should have been done through the decades. And then people are getting on the subways, and there's delays and breakdowns there.
We saw
and it's kind of shown the light on. It's kind of ironic, no?
Well, we saw it before, back in 2009 when gasoline first hit, 2008 when gasoline first hit $4 a gallon. People were flooding into the subways, and they weren't able to handle the extra crowds. The rolling stock is in bad shape. The signals are in bad shape. The rails themselves are in bad shape. And here we are all these years later, and we're still talking about trying to take care of these problems. I remember a report from then Comptroller Bill Thompson that outlined all these problems. That's going back all the way then, 2008.
For people who are not totally familiar with it, congestion pricing is not a totally new idea. It's elsewhere in the world, right? I believe London?
It's in London, and really, London helps to point to some flaws in the system, because if we're talking about $5 or $5.76, London's congestion pricing scheme charges £11.50.
How much is that, U.S.?
$14.94.
Almost 15 bucks.
Yeah.
What difference has it made? Has it worked to what they hoped it would do?
It's cut down on traffic significantly, but most important, we think, is that the money goes totally to the mass transit system, namely the buses, which helps to relieve the congestion on the tube system. That we think should be the case if and when this happens here. But we're talking about a significantly lower number of vehicles that are going into downtown London than are coming into lower Manhattan.
Let's go back to that, because I think you saw 240,000.
About 240,000 in London.
Did you give a breakdown on Queens, Long Island? Well, what do we know about that?
Well, it's probably about 37,000 of that 242,000 that are driving into work would be coming from Queens, and there's no really viable mass transit alternative for them. If they had to go to the Bronx, there are only 2 bus lines that are going there, and the majority of them are coming from Southeast Queens and Northeast Queens, where there just is not a bus line, that viable bus line. And if a person's doing some kind of shift work, if they're starting at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning, they're not going to go stand on a bus stop. They're going to drive.
Well, what about Nassau and Suffolk? How many people are driving? And we're talking about a rush hour.
Right, another 20,000 from Nassau, 11,000 from Suffolk. Again, these are people who are driving to Manhattan to work. So, you know, roughly 31, 32,000 from Long Island.
Yeah, and so, you know, what we saw in the past is that there was tremendous protest, especially from people in the outer boroughs who were like, wow, we're really getting punished for this. But, of course, the others would say you've been getting a free ride, maybe, on the East River bridges. I
don't know what they define as free, because $1 billion comes out of the bridge and tunnel tolls, the intra-city MTA bridges and tunnels.
$1 billion?
$1 billion comes from the tolls, goes to mass transit. Another $600 million comes from the PBT, petroleum business tax. That's everybody in the state that's buying gasoline is paying that. So we're talking about $1,600 million coming out of drivers' pockets, and that is not enough. We're not paying our fair share. That notion is ridiculous.
Here's the thing. Everybody complains about getting these kind of fees on them. Of course they would. Who wouldn't blame you for being upset about getting a new fee after all the taxes we pay in this area and in New York State? But the system is badly in need of repair. What are we supposed to do?
Well, that's a good question, and we'd be willing to sit at the table to listen to whatever proposals might come up, but you cannot do one thing. You cannot be just congestion pricing. Look, going back to 2009, I believe it was, they reinstituted the commuter tax, and here we are again these years later looking for something else. So it cannot be just one thing, and perhaps has to be some sort of combination.
Well, we have to go, but just quickly, will AAA come out against a congestion pricing plan?
It all depends. We were willing to look at congestion pricing when it was part of the Move New York scheme, which would have lowered tolls where there are tolls and instituted them where there are none. But that plan has been progressively stripped away, and now we're just down to congestion pricing.
All right.
Alone, we don't like it.
We're just trying to get to work.
Yeah, that's all.
Robert Sinclair with AAA Northeast, thanks for stopping in with the update.
Thank you for having me.